Hi everyone, and welcome to another bimco Bites. Today we're looking at adaptive components, and we'll be looking at mostly an overview of what they are. And we'll be looking at the family template and where you can access that, and also the elements that make up the adaptive component environment, in particular model lines, reference lines, points, and how to make those points adaptive. So what are adaptive components? Well, adaptive components are Revit families that adapt to their environment. But they also have certain qualities that set them apart from the regular family environment. So, for example, the use of points to drive geometry. There you can see in the picture there, and adaptive points for placement. So you'll notice that there's points here on the corner, and they can be used for placement. The ability to loft geometry, the ability to manipulate surfaces, edges, and paths, and also the ability to be able to repeat particular components across a face in a project. So, for example, useful for facades where you've got certain components that you'd like to repeat. Let's have a couple look at some examples that we have here. So here's a very simple example of a shading system here over a picnic bench. You'll notice that if I kind of go into elevation here, that the geometry is not quite just a revolve, and it's not quite a sweep either. If you kind of think about the tools that you have within the regular family environment, this type of geometry would be actually pretty hard to achieve. So this is using a combination of lofting different lines and profiles, and that's how you can achieve this kind of unique shape. So that's one example. Let's also take a look at some other examples. I've just got a little setup here. Another example is if you go up into the sky, we've just got a 747 here. So let's go and edit that and have a look and see what's inside. So this family, by the way, is available up on Kinship. So you can see here this geometry here, particularly the front of the plane here. This geometry would be, again, pretty hard to achieve if you're relying on the regular family environment. It's got kind of a unique shape there in elevation. It's not just a cylindrical tube. It's got some other geometries there. And so we can take a look just by using the X-ray tool here, just how much more complicated that is. So you can see here the profiles that are making up this part of the geometry here. And then we'll basically loft between those geometries to then get the desired shape. Okay, let's close that. Let's take a look at a curtain. It's coming back down here. So you can see here, maybe you've got a hospital project, maybe where you've got, you want a privacy screen for a hospital bed, or maybe even a large curtain for a theater. You notice that this particular curtain here is curved. So typically, if you're doing like a privacy screen or privacy curtain in a hospital bed, in plan, you probably have two curtains that would just kind of jut up against each other at a very sharp corner. But in reality, the curtain rod that's holding that curtain would actually bend around a certain radius. So you can use this type of family to achieve that. So I'll just show you if I create an instance of this. I'm prompted to place points, actually. I'm not actually just prompted to place the family, but to actually place points. So when I do my first click there, my second click out here, and then my third click, you'll notice as I move the mouse, the family is adapting to where my points are. So say if I click there, and there's my curtain. So this can be used for families that need to, travel around corners or that typically aren't just straight or linear. Adaptive curtains can be used for that. Let's have a look at another family that's actually up on Kinship, and that's our chute diverter. So maybe you've got a setup here. We've got a rubbish chute coming down through an apartment block, and then you've got a diverter for rubbish and for recycling. It doesn't look particularly special, but you notice here that there are points within that family. You'll notice that there's a number 1, 2, and 3. And again, those are the points that we place so that we can then manipulate. So I'll show you what that looks like. So let's go and create another instance of this. And I'm going to place on a particular work plane. I'm going to pick this existing reference plane that I've got and say I want the first one to be maybe somewhere around here, maybe the second one to be around here, and say third one to be somewhere around there. So you'll notice now as I orbit around, that family is being placed there. But the advantage is that I can then actually, if I go to a kind of a little bit of a side view, I can actually then tab select on those points and then actually adjust them on the fly. So, in some cases, manipulating families like this is much easier than having to manipulate, numbers on the properties panel, or having to drag certain blue handle grips in a plan view or elevation. Just being able to grab this little gizmo here and move it however we like is much easier. And you can obviously move it then in other axes as well. So you can move it as you require. So we end up with a one that's in multiple planes, not just on a singular plane. Okay, and let's have a look at one more example here. And this is a train station here, and it's a curved train station. And if you had a trained family, or if you would request a trained family, typically you'd probably be a linear trained family, and it wouldn't necessarily have this functionality included. But with adaptive components, we're able to bend around the corner as we need. So I'll show you what that looks like on placement again. So we're going to create similar. And here I've already prepared some lines to represent where I want my other train to be. I think this is we move along here. I think this is a 3-point family. You'll notice the processing is a little bit slow because it's trying to adapt to the environment. Okay, so I've done my second click and now it's awaiting my third. So I want to come back here, scroll down a little bit. Let's see if we can find our third point, probably somewhere around here. Let's just say here, for example. Okay, third point. All right, just got a little warning about not being visible. All right, so it looks like actually we need to place our second point first and then our third one. So let's go and try that again. So there are multiple ways that you can place families. In this case, I'm actually doing the midpoint second and not last, unlike the curtain. So first click there. Coming in for my second click here, somewhere around the middle, we'll estimate. And the third point's actually going to be the end point. So this is all settings that you can determine when you're creating your family, the clicking order. All right, so you can see a little preview there. All right, and that's much better. So you can see now the train's bending around the corner, and in 3D, you can see it's upside down because of the direction that we drew it, but there's also a nice little flip parameter here. So we're going to click on that, and it will flip the work plane so it's hosted the right way. There you go. There's our train. Okay, so how do we actually go about creating these types of families? Well, first we need to open up a new adaptive component template. So I'm going to go new family, and if you're linked to our family templates folder, which hopefully you are, you'll see that there's a bimco generic model adaptive template. I'm going to click open. And you notice that it looks a little bit different to what you're used to. These reference planes seem to kind of disappear as you orbit around. And my recommendation in general is that you should be using the 3D view predominantly to do a lot of your modeling. And we're not going to get into the details of how to use each of these elements that we're about to look at, but suffice to say, these are the building blocks of adaptive components. Okay, let's take a look at model lines. So model lines, all they do is they just create lines that exist in 3D space. So nothing new there, similar to the project environment or the regular family environment. All we do there, we're just creating lines there, and those would be visible in 3D. Reference lines, however, they're a little bit different. So if I go in, let's say, draw this on level plane. If I do 2 points there, you'll notice that when I select it, there's actually a whole bunch of reference planes that we can see. So compared to model lines, they've got the added advantage of having work planes that you can sketch and host on. There's one parallel and perpendicular to the actual line. So it's these ones here. And then there's one on each end. So the one over here and the one over here. So that's really useful for being able to host certain geometry or lines or points onto. And the last one is the point element itself. So let's go and click on that. And you notice that that point exists in 3D space. So this is a feature that you won't get in the regular family environment. You can manipulate its position, and it's also got a whole bunch of other parameters here on the side. The neat thing that you can do with points, for example, like we saw previously with our aeroplane, is that if you actually place a couple of points here, so I'm going to place this on our ref level there. If I place a couple of points just like that, for example, and then I go and select these, there's actually a spline through points tool that the adaptive component environment has. If I go and click on that, it'll automatically create a spline that runs through those points that I've just created. And the great thing is that because these points exist in 3D space, I can actually manipulate my spline in 3D. So this is where you can start to get some really interesting geometries that maybe you previously thought, weren't possible. Okay, so let's go and make these points now adaptive. So we've created those points. I'm going to go and select them all. And you'll notice that when I select those points, a new tool comes up here. It says make adaptive. I'm going to click on that. So what that allows me to do is that it changes those points into these points with these little work planes or reference planes around them. And what that lets me do is it lets me use those as placement points in a project. So remember these little points here. So for example, with the train, so there's one of the points there. The second point will be halfway here. You can see there's a number 2. It's very faint. And then number 3. These are all adaptive points. So these are the placement points within the project. So at the moment, in this little simple family here, I would be having 5 placement points that I would be having to click within the project if I were to load this into a project. So let's just go and see if we were to, just for the sake of example, connect to this line here and host it onto some of these points, say from point 2 to point 4, just so we can see how that works in the project and just do some testing or flexing. Yep, we can see that line follows along. Let's now go load this into our project. Let's actually go and place it. Let's go and maybe we'll go place on face now. And I guess we can go back to ground level. That might be okay. So 1, 2, 3, you can start to see the other line that we drew in, 4 and 5. So there's our little component. You can see the numbers that appear. And then you can also see when I tab select on one of those points, we get a little gizmo, and that can then be manipulated. So you can see how that geometry is now manipulated by those points.